We've started already. It's gone wrong.
Oh, it's already gone wrong. Hello and welcome to the first of hopefully many podcasts, which we don't even have a name for, or I don't even have a name for.
We were talking about calling it Robcasts.
Just because this was my idea,
Is
there doesn't appear to be an actual better title
I think
for
it's a perfectly acceptable idea.
Yeah, but
Robcast.
he doesn't really say what it is.
We
haven't really even decided what it is.
What is it?
So those of you who are listening to this are hearing the inaugural Robcast, which is where myself, Andy Edwards,
And myself, Rob Grokert.
And myself, Richard Boxley.
basically talk about whatever comes into our heads. We haven't got any plan for this whatsoever, have we? The whole point is to see what we capture, just talking aimlessly about whatever we end up talking about, which at the moment is this podcast, isn't it? Because,
This is
that's where we start with this podcast.
This is like a meta, like this is like the conversation about the thing itself before the thing is even created.
About the podcast.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, I'm hoping that this whole podcast will not just be about this podcast, because
maybe we need to talk about the podcast.
Yeah. The levels
Shall we
upon
talk
levels.
about the podcast at the start?
It's turtles all
we
the
haven't
way
already done
down.
that.
No. So, I mean, yeah, I think the focus that we've all talked about is just creativity, I think, in general. My idea was to talk about sort of lots of aspects of creativity, because we have these conversations all the time, which, as obviously I'm hoping that some people will know that we're all musicians, but we all do things that are sort of outside of music in the creative world. So my idea was just to be able to talk about anything creative that either we are sort of doing at the time, or we find is interesting. But inevitably, I think it's going to be very potentially music based.
Well, I'm going to posit something intellectual right at the start, right? Because the idea of this is that we talk like this all the time at work with the students, and we thought we should capture some of these conversations, and they get quite abstract and they get quite funny, and we go around all sorts of subjects. And so the idea was to capture it. And I think the fundamental definition of what art is, and this comes from Frank Zappa, is the idea it's about the frame. Right, so this podcast becomes the frame, isn't it? As soon as we hit record and we've got sort of a time limit around us talking and we're recording it, the frame is the podcast, and we're hoping that we actually manage to capture what we do naturally
within the frame.
Within the frame, yeah. And this is what we're struggling with right now, is to try and create a natural conversation. So, is the first question, if art is the frame, how does art change? Is it reality, or is it something else? And if it's not reality, what is it?
Yeah, but, I mean, this to even go a little deeper in the intellectual thing, this is that sort of, when people talk about the quantum physics, not quantum realm like in the
like
Marvel films, but it's whether things are changed by their perception.
Yeah, this is
if they are perceived.
Yeah, this is precisely the question that has popped into my mind as soon as we start doing the reality of this, we're trying to make a conversation happen.
Yeah. You even have to question, what is reality at that point? Are we even real?
I mean,
and is this more real than reality, because it will exist beyond the normal conversation?
Well, beyond this conversation in the room.
Yeah,
and this is the thing, I think. In terms of the conversations that people have about art, especially at the moment, politically, whatever, about funding and stuff like that, which we will eventually, inevitably get onto. It's like art can exist in any forms, but as soon as it's accessible to somebody else, it becomes something that whoever has created it isn't necessarily in control of. But does that make something more real by it being perceived by more people? I mean, hoping that more people than the three of us will ever listen to this, of course.
It depends if the people are real.
I mean, so this is what Rich is.
I'm going to get out like a
the really zen route of the.
Yes, but before I've got to just bring this in. Before we started recording, and when we were doing the tests, you were arguing that Bigfoot is real.
Well.
And now you're arguing that nothing is real. So we can see that your contribution is contradicting at least.
Well, we have to make certain assumptions perhaps, in order for this podcast to function. And one of those assumptions is that we are real. But just because we assume that doesn't mean it's true.
So that is it the fact that if to make this podcast work, we've got to assume we're real, and to make art, you have to assume that things are real, that you are commenting about something, and it seems like a bit of a Zen thing, but I've always thought you have to at least assume that other people are real, because I know I'm real, right? But the thing is that the whole point is you want to try and communicate. We're doing this because we want to try and communicate something to somebody else, and for them to chime with them, and for them to go, "Oh yeah, I agree with that. That's really good," but I don't agree with that. And then there's a conversation. So is that the first starting point with creativity? Is the assumption that someone else is there on the receiving end of this dialogue? You know, that there's going to be someone receptive to what's going on.
If there was no one there on the other end, why would we be doing it?
But this is the question that we get posed with a lot anyway, is why do you even, what the reasons for doing anything anyway? Do you do something because you enjoy it?
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. So if you take away the potential of the audience, whether or not we're questioning the actual fabric of reality, it's like, if your perception of yourself is that you're real, then you do something that you enjoy doing. It's the reason we all said we'd come in. We are actually in on a day off from work to do this. There must be a reason to want to do it.
Is?
Well, we should get to that at some point. I mean, I don't even know if we've actually introduced properly yet. I mean, we've introduced ourselves.
The thing is if anyone is listening to this, they can at least hang on a little bit to find out who we are. Don't tell them now.
It's like a cold start that's about half an hour long.
But there I am referring to the audience. See, for me, I think a lot of what I do artistically is the assumption of someone's at the receiving end.
Somebody's going to listen or watch.
And you've actually, it's slightly blown my mind, because I thought if I was stuck on a desert island and nobody was there, and I'd got my guitar, I'm pretty sure that would be a brilliant thing, because I'd be able to play my guitar every day, and that would be entirely for me. So you've now made me question my basic premise as a starting point to what art is and creativity is. It's trying to communicate to somebody else, because...
But it will. Does it necessarily have to? I think it's like... I mean, there is no one definition, is there? Because there's obviously... You know, as much as a load of an audience, a massive audience, might enjoy something that you do, but if you don't enjoy doing that, you're just not going to do it. In which case, whether the audience enjoys that is irrelevant. And when I say audience,
so
whoever
my enjoyment
is
on the desert island is purely down to the fact that I'm just practicing,
or just doing something. I mean, keeping you sane, or just because it's something you enjoy doing.
But is it practice?
No, it could be. But I think there's a difference between practicing and playing for pleasure. And so if you're on a desert island and you're just playing, then you're playing, you're not practicing. Irrespective of whether there's an audience or not.
As soon as we start having this conversation, it's straight away just trying to get a real simple, which is what I'd hope to do.
Yeah.
I've got my own complex concepts of what creativity is and what art is and how those two relate. But I haven't mentioned any of those yet. I'm going to bring those in slowly. I just thought I'd go with a real basic one, which is just, what most people... We're just trying to communicate feelings or ideas to other people. And straight away, you hit a minefield of... Well, that doesn't... This is the thing with art and creativity. It's very ephemeral, and you can't pin down really what it is. And I think this is what causes... funding issues, crises in people, whether it's worth pursuing. These are the reasons why, because it's almost like the opposite of science in a way, because science is about evidence.
It's rigid and
trying to establish an idea of truth, and then the artist comes along, as Rob has done, and goes, what is truth? Or as you have said, what is reality? That's the artist's answer to anything is to question it on another level. So this other level that I'm discussing is art about this other level, which is not about facts, evidence and truth. Could we establish that, agree on that art deals with another realm that is not about truth?
I think it does come down to it being, it's not necessarily something that is quantifiable, or at least quantifiable by a system, a group of people.
Yeah.
I think the difference between objectivity and subjectivity. I think art to everybody is individual, whether it's creator or consumer. So, but then
I don't
this is that thing, because I think it's like whatever I might be doing creatively, there is always still a mind of whether it's the little voice in my head or a screaming voice in my head that says, are people going to enjoy listening to this or watching this or whatever it is I'm creating. I mean, I think mostly it's driven by my own taste. So I like this thing, so I'm going to do this. But I think there is always still the idea of somebody else would hopefully enjoy this. And I think if I was putting something out which was just, I think this is great, but I feel like nobody else is going to enjoy this thing at all, I haven't had that situation. I don't think anybody would, but in a theoretical sense, I don't know whether I'd want to put that out.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, I think that the idea that art's individual and subjective, which is another thing that people jump to, can be questioned too. And I'm going to try and do an experiment now just to see if I'm right. Because we were all talking about Doctor Who.
Yes.
Before. I mean, on these podcasts, we do eventually want to capture these ridiculous conversations we have about Bigfoot and Doctor Who.
These are conversations that we do have as well. This is not forced. This is like,
yeah. So it'd be lovely to have established our sort of credentials. We're not philosophers, we're not psychologists, we're musicians, and we also teach. We're giving it away now. We teach music students as well, so we have to try.
We're music teachers.
We're music teachers.
We are music teachers.
Yes. So, that's our credentials. We're not saying we're great philosophers, but I believe that it isn't entirely subjective. So, as we were talking about Doctor Who, I want you all to think in your minds which was the best Doctor Who of all the Doctor Whos. Right now, we're all slightly different ages. I am to you. And you can't just deliberately pick Colin Baker.
I'm not going to.
Right, so I have decided who I think the best Doctor Who is. So we stick to it. So who do you think is the best one?
It's too difficult.
It's not. It's obvious.
You say it's obvious. Do you want me to say it out loud?
Yeah. Go on, yeah.
Oh no, but I'm going to go David Tennant.
You.
Exactly.
This is
exactly.
See, I'm going to lose here.
My wife would absolutely agree with you.
And maybe that's not that he's the best Doctor. Maybe
no,
I'm just a fan of
which
David.
Was the best Doctor. I didn't say pick one that's not the best Doctor.
Who happened to play Doctor Who.
Yeah.
He's not the best actor. Who's the best Doctor? Ignore him.
Okay, mine, and this comes down to something which we'll probably get onto at some point.
I'll deal with you.
There is a theory. There's a theory about bands that you came up with. You'll probably know what I'm going to say. But mine, I have to say, is Tom Baker. The fourth
my
Doctor.
choice was Tom Baker.
Yeah,
which means that's the correct answer, and that's the conversation.
You own an artifact, don't you? You were discussing it before. See,
this actually does
tell them what artifact you own.
I own the scarf and the hat.
Not actually the ones that belong to him. They're replicas.
Yes. Yeah. And the scarf was knitted by much of the street where I grew up.
That's not true.
It was team knitted by neighbours.
Excuse me.
You got your street to knit you a Tom Baker scarf.
Because it's so massive.
Right, I'm pretty sure if I went to my street and put notes in the letterbox saying, I really would like a Tom Baker scarf. Can you all get together?
My mum started knitting it, but it was becoming quite a big job because I'd specified that it needs to be about 1 metre wide and 7 metres long.
Why?
Because
how old were you when you specified that, you spoilt child?
I don't know, a couple of years ago. And that was too big a job for one person, so my mum did it a bit, then she passed it on to a neighbour, and they did a bit.
But was part of it still in your house, and just the rest of it was next door?
I hope all the listeners have realised why we got Richard Boxley on the team now.
Yeah.
Because those of you who are going, oh my God, this is far too intellectual and boring. We're now on to Tom Baker's replica scarf. So,
but going back to what
keep on the scarf.
No, we'll come to that.
So she organised them. How did she organise them? Was there some sort of meeting?
Probably.
Or was it done through some sort of postal system?
I think it was probably phone calls.
Really?
Yeah.
It was a coordinated.
Yeah.
And did you have it for your birthday or something?
No, it was a Halloween party, and it was a fancy dress
Oh my God!
Halloween party.
That's amazing.
And I can't remember the theme of. It might have been sci-fi. Was
So
the theme
did you not
of the,
think of getting them to knit a David Tennant artifact?
No, what
I rest my case.
I want no, because do you remember when we were talking about that first album theory or whatever?
Yes, yeah,
And-
which
and
I
I
do want to
said-
talk about.
I would say that I can't remember what band it was. It was Nirvana. I'd say In Utero was my favourite album, but in truth, Nevermind is the one that's
Always
in
the
the
one
car,
you
and
put
that's
on.
the one that I always listen to. So I might say that David Tennant is my favourite Doctor, but in truth, it's Tom Baker.
But when you
So
think, when somebody says
But
Doctor Who,
I don't even know it myself.
You've got like 13 faces now
Yeah.
that can flash through your mind. And when somebody says Doctor Who is the face that appears? And for me, it is still Tom Baker, even though
Yeah.
I've watched way more of like the later ones,
I can't.
and I do enjoy
I'm
them.
thinking about it too
It's-
much now. It's,
Well, the thing,
Yeah,
my
yeah.
point is that I think Richard has illustrated something that you can do with art is you can make an objective judgment and go, I think Tom Baker's the best, and then you can have your personal judgment. I think human beings are able to do that, and that's integral to art, actually, in that,
Yeah.
you know, anyone who has made music, we've all made music, there's part of you that's doing the thing you really like, but then you sort of step back and you become objective and you do something that you think the audience will like, which comes
Yeah.
back to I do think this idea of the audience and from that becomes a sort of objectivity. Now maybe objectivity doesn't exist, but what art does is sort of fake objectivity. It makes you think about other human beings. It creates empathy, which is a very important thing for human beings to have, in that you think about what other people would like and not like, and once you're thinking about what other people like and not like, that actually is the fabric of morality. And I would argue, because you know a lot of religious people say you need a god for morality to exist. I think you need art for morality to exist, and that would be my argument for that, you know. And so I think the idea that we can objectively say that Tom Baker's the best Doctor, and then as we say, I think, yeah, but we're all of a certain age. I'm a little bit older than you, and so I can remember John Pertwee, and so I've got John Pertwee, you know, vying, because he was really good as well.
yeah.
But so our personal experience does colour it. You
Yeah.
know, I'm sure there's people older than me with William Hartnell and Patrick Troughton, because I'm sure they must have been very good, but I have no memory of those really.
But I mean and this kind of thing comes down to the sort of like who is the best one. Generally, the first one that you see. So if somebody first saw William Hartnell, the first Doctor Who, and loved that series, and then when it changed to Patrick Troughton, regardless of whether or not Patrick Troughton could be completely, say, objectively better, but people are still like, oh, but he's not the same. And that's again exactly what you're saying is that it does come down to the perception, really.
There's another thing here that's interesting, going back to the Doctor Who thing, is that I think a lot of people will feel that the classic Doctor Who's, you know, the 70s Doctor Who's are the classic ones, and I'm sure the fans go on about that. Now, we were talking about the Christopher Eccleston Doctor Who's, where the BBC decided to really up the production values, didn't they? And go away from the sort of naff, awful
I think because it had
production
been
values of the
but it had been a
70s.
long time, hadn't it, between
Yeah, I can't. I mean, Sylvester McCoy was the last of that
that was what the
initial era, wasn't it?
Did he ruin the
that
Doctor
was
Who?
like early 90s, mid 90s, mid 93 or something like that. I don't know. I mean,
he?
I
I
have got this
can't
computer
remember.
here.
Did he
I should
ruin, did he
research.
ruin Doctor
Shall I
Who?
research? I'll
There-
just
There
research.
was that Doctor Who film in
Paul
between.
McGann, who is apparently who
is-
does count. Yeah,
Yeah, considered.
Well, if you're going to do that, then there's a film with Peter Cushing in.
but apparently he doesn't count, and I don't know why. The Planet of the Daleks, or Doctor
Yeah.
Who and the Daleks. Or
It's a
something.
really
Yeah,
good
yeah.
film. I can remember watching that when I enjoyed that far more than any Doctor Who, because I got to admit I wasn't a huge Doctor Who fan, and I wasn't a huge Doctor Who fan because they were awful, plastic.
I mean, this comes down to exactly
rubbish.
Andy's opinion of it, which is that it's just terrible.
It was just
he just does not like it.
Well, when I was a kid, I was a big Star Trek fan, and Star Trek managed to pull off,
Yeah, but that was
some sort of production values. But Doctor Who for me was really
that was because Doctor Who's made by the BBC.
Exactly.
They haven't got as much money.
But my point is that most people would think that those are...
But even that original Star Trek was the sets were always looked the same.
Yeah,
whenever
now
they
when
went
you
down
watch
to
them,
a planet,
they never seem to
the
go outside.
polystyrene rocks.